As a filmmaker, there's nothing I love more than capturing what I would call moody footage. Dark, rainy, atmospheric. The internet seems to like this style too, and I mean, you're here, so maybe you feel the same way. I've devoted much of my work to finding and capturing the darkest, rainiest, moodiest locations. Capturing these scenes is a ton of fun, but it also comes with some unique challenges. A few weeks ago, I did a project all about rainforests in the Scottish Highlands, an exceptionally moody location and an exceptionally moody video. And I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to tell you everything I know about capturing that wonderful, wonderful mood. We'll talk about lighting and shooting in the rain and moody color grading and atmospheric sound design, but first, the mood, as usual, started in pre-production. I had a few main inspirations for this project's visuals. First, just the kind of cultural image of Scotland and just the British Isles overall as this dreary, grey place where the sun doesn't really come out. Also, the Scottish landscape itself, like these dark, imposing cliffs, and also the small, twisted kind of fairies forest, as well as past art depicting these landscapes. The gothic horror stories that they inspired during the Victorian era, and the romantic paintings of the Highlands, many of them depicting this stormy, imposing landscape. I assembled some moody inspiration, a mood board, you might say, and I hunted down the moodiest locations, the rockiest, most imposing mountains, and the deepest, darkest, most lush gorges. And I gathered a bunch of vintage paintings and illustrations that reflected that dark, mysterious, stormy atmosphere. I think it goes without saying that the weather is a big factor for shooting this kind of footage, and on this project, that characteristic Scottish weather absolutely came through. Constant rain, fog, and the clouds hugging the mountains, and strong winds in the valleys, which I actually liked when I could get something in the foreground and show that strong wind. It just made the landscape feel that much more barren and hostile. And that constant, strong rain did all sorts of wonderful things for the appearance of this footage. It brings out color in the landscape, creates reflections on roads and plants, gets on the lens, which can look kind of cool, created these hundreds of cascades running down the mountains. I could shoot into the rain on some footage, and I could capture these big sheets of rain moving through the landscape. Of course, always do this kind of shooting at your own risk. Weather-sealed gear is always going to be a good idea. I shot this project on 2 Lumix S5s, which are weather-sealed pretty well and held up great. I also left my gear out to dry at the end of each day and slipped some silica gel packs into my camera bag to help soak up some of that moisture. The weather on this trip was also just really helpful for lighting. It was dark and overcast pretty much all day, every day, which allowed me to go for a very dark, dreary look overall and allow large sections of the scene to sink away into deep shadow. Of course, if the natural light isn't just naturally on your side like this, there's plenty you can do, like backlighting or shooting the dark side of your subject, creating softer light and allowing more of the scene to fall into shadow. You could use a mist filter to soften out the highlights. You could shoot toward the beginning and end of the day when the sun is lower, meaning the light is softer and more of the scene is in shadow. And you can just shoot shadier locations, like these narrow gorges. I shot these in the middle of the day, but they're still almost completely in shadow. I shot a couple of scenes at blue hour, which helped to create this really nice melancholic atmosphere and create some color contrast with these streetlights or the lights on this castle. The video includes a lot of macro shots of like plants and lichens, which I tried to frame against very dark backgrounds that would appear almost like just a black void on camera. And for these archival sections, I went for some candlelit lighting, which I just faked in post using an overlay. For a lot of shots, I'm using a tight focal length to isolate the moodiest sections, whether that's the darkest, cloudiest mountain peaks, or the most green and lush sections of forest. This was a mix between the Lumix 70-200 f2.8 and the more recently released Lumix 100mm f2.8 macro. I also did several shots with this long zoom effect, which is really growing on me as a way to create a strange, unnatural atmosphere. All throughout shooting this project, I was looking for ways to make the images a bit dirtier, like break them down in ways that would create more atmosphere and texture. The last thing I want here is a pristine, crystal clear image. That included shooting through rain and mist, incorporating foreground elements into my compositions, allowing rain to smudge the lens, creating blurring effects, throwing large sections of the scene out of focus, introducing some natural camera shake, and adding bloom, halation, and a whole lot of grain in the edit. Techniques like these are a whole lot of fun to play around with, and they make a great way to bring that rainy, stormy weather closer into the images and really just submerge the viewer in the scene. Of course, I could never make a video about capturing moody footage without talking about creating the classic Moody color grade. I wanted this project to really starkly contrast the rugged, barren expanse of much of the Scottish Highlands against the lush, small pockets of surviving rainforest. So I went with two main color schemes, a rusty orange and blank gray for those more open, rugged sections, and a very lush, deep green for the rainforest sections. I dropped the shadows way down and made sure that the highlights stayed pretty soft and muted. I let the white balance lean cooler than I usually would and pushed the tint a bit more green. I used the hue curves to exaggerate the green and mute the oranges, making them feel rustier. I used the color wheels to flood the shadows with bluish green, and finally I used a whole lot of vignetting and gradients to darken up the edges of the frame. And while we're in the editing bay here, your sound is just as important as your visuals. Music and sound, if used right, are tools second to none for creating that visceral atmosphere. Before going into the edit, I picked out music that reflected the emotion I was hoping to convey. Drama, mystery, bit of melancholy, and I layered in lots of environmental sound reflecting the environment. Wind, thunder, rain, animals, the cascades, along with some spooky atmospheric sound in certain sections. This project was so much fun because I got to pull out all of the stops for creating this extremely moody, stormy atmosphere. But still, these are just the techniques that I choose to use. There are so many other ways and other approaches to get at the same result. So if you have some tricks of your own, don't be shy. Share them in the comments. I would love to hear more about your own workflow for capturing that delicious, wonderful mood. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video, learned something new from it, and if you did, be sure to subscribe to Adorama TV for thousands of other videos like this one, including a couple dozen exactly like this one, where we sit down, walk through these projects, and talk about various filmmaking effects and techniques. Stick around, I think you'll learn something. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.